Welcome to Dukascopy TV. The ocean is a huge resource, but what can we do to protect and preserve it? Joining me in the studio is Gustaf Lundin. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start about the climate meeting in Lima. Well, there's been a limited focus on the role of oceans in regulating the climate. Can you tell us about the report and ocean carbon?
So I think one of the interesting things is we live in a blue planet, but most of us think of this as Earth, which of course means land. So a lot of the focus we've had so far working on climate issues has been on how can we manage our forests better, what can we do in terms of land cover and how we're doing it. While that is all good, I think we've sometimes been neglecting the importance of the ocean. So what we've tried to do now is come up with some numbers to get a better sense of what's actually happening there in the ocean and what's the role of oceans in regulating our climate. There's broadly three main areas where we find this to be really interesting. The first one, which we're talking about today, is what happens to the carbon, particularly the carbon that we're burning right now and that's ending up in the atmosphere, and some of it is ending up in land. And then the other part is ending up in the ocean. The second part of it is what's happening to ocean carbon that actually gets dissolved, which leads to a more acidic ocean, which is a bit like a carbonated drink. And the third issue really is what's happening to the carbon that is being stored in various places, and for example at the bottom of the ocean. So having a better understanding of what's happening there. So what we're trying to do today is perhaps talk a little bit about what's happening and the role of oceans in regulating the climate. So what we do have is a situation where the oceans actually play a very significant role in what happens with our climate. And there's three broad areas where the oceans are important. The first one is in terms of storing carbon one way or another in the ocean. The second part of it is actually as absorbing a lot of the heat, the warmth that's happening, and there it has a very significant effect. And the third one is really dissolving ocean, which leads to a somewhat more acidic ocean. So what we've done with our report that was released this week is looking at some of the numbers when it comes to ocean carbon. Now, ocean carbon broadly can be categorized in two main categories. One is what is being dissolved in the ocean, and the second part is what is actually being stored at the bottom of the ocean, or what is stored in living things that are standing stock in a sense. So you can think of krill, for example, in the same way as you think of forest. There's a certain amount of carbon in there. And if we look at living things, in fact, krill is the biggest carbon deposit we have in the ocean. Now, one interesting thing is that every year, when it comes to human consumption, we burn about 8 gigatons, and we put another gigaton up through bad land use practices, deforestation, burning of things in an inappropriate way, for example. Out of that, 4 of the 9 stay in the atmosphere, and that's why we have this increasing heat that we're afraid of is going to destroy a lot of things on the planet. The 5, 3 of them end up being captured on land, and out of that 3, 0.9 goes through the rivers and out into the ocean. And about 2 gigatons end up already directly into the ocean, either being dissolved as acidification or being taken up by marine organisms. What we're trying to see is, what can we do to improve management of the ocean that would actually help us? And as it turns out, if we manage our coastal areas and our ocean in a better way, we're going to do a lot of advantages in terms of our carbon balance. So this is a relatively cost-effective way of improving management of the climate.
And what are the implications for business of this report?
One of the issues we've had with business engagement in climate is that it's hard for them to understand what they can actually do. What's their role and what can they do to improve the way we're managing the climate. I think what we're seeing now is that some bad management practices like overfishing, particularly destructive fishing, is something that is already subsidized in many countries. So we're actually paying people to go out and destroy the resource. On top of that, it actually has a significant climate impact as well. So this helps get the numbers on that. It helps us better understand why it is that the current practices we have are not as friendly as they would. So I think it will encourage businesses to also calculate the overall cost of their business. Now, you might still have the tendency of rape and pillage that some businesses have. And I think within the fishing sector, you've had that. Deep sea fishing, for example, using bottom trawling has been a very destructive practice. We know it's not a good thing for us to do, yet a number of companies still continue doing that. This is another reason why they should stop doing that. I think there's also positive to say that, if we improve our management of the ocean, we can actually have more productivity in it, which for all of us is a good thing. So here there's also a business case to be made that good management of oceans is good for business and good for the planet.
So it's changing the mindset to change the world.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people want to do the right thing. So it's not so hard to encourage businesses if they know what they need to do. So to be more specific, of course there's a lot of plants growing in the ocean as well. Plants are very good at taking up carbon. The question is what happens to them when they start decaying. Some of them will sink to the bottom, which means they actually will help capture more carbon. Others could be harvested and used for various purposes. So if we manage them in a good way, we can actually improve the carbon balance here, and that could be another good example of what business can get involved in.
So if a business wanted to get involved, where should they go?
I think the first thing is to obviously make a good business case for why you're out there. We are now seeing ways of claiming or getting concessions for using certain types of ocean resources. In the past, that was really difficult to get your hand on, so there were very few private property rights or user rights in the ocean. I think governments and together with industry are waking up to the fact that you have resources that can be used in a good way. You can also spoil them. And I think it's working then with the regulator to come up with where do we have some good business cases and how can we actually improve on the management.
Well, thank you for coming in today to explain that.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So that's all we have time for today here at Gustaf TV. Make sure you keep checking back in for the latest news. Goodbye.